there.
There we go. So we're recording the climate literacy weekly meeting. Today is March 21st. It's the year 2023. I say that because Clean has maybe hit the Guinness Book of World Record on weekly network meetings since 2008. I don't remember which month it was in 2008 we started, probably in the spring, but to have weekly meetings that many years on climate and energy literacy is pretty astounding. And just, always remember, those who are here are just representatives of the wider network of 800 plus people. We all know that in the network, there are many lurkers. They tell us that's what they call themselves. So it's not a pejorative. It is actually what they name themselves as, and they get tremendous value out of these meetings and these recordings. So all of us, just let's always remember that we are not ourselves in this room, you know what I mean by room, but we are joined by people who are passively joining us after and on the website and the resources. So these things move beyond just the people here. So let's always remember that. So in our practice, we start with announcements. I think most people know each other here, but maybe I'm wrong, Molly. So maybe why don't we do
announcements in the chat too?
Exactly. Why don't we all introduce ourselves to each other in the chat? And that, I think it's fast way because we have a presentation today. But do we have any announcements that we need to say, or we can put it in the chat, or say and put it in the chat? So before we jump into the presentation today from NAAEE and NOAA. I do have one, but I'm going to wait and see if anyone else has one. Okay.
Looks like Jim has his hand raised,
and
I happen to
Jim.
know Molly has an announcement as well. So let's go to Jim and then Molly.
Actually, if you don't mind, I always like new people to say some. You get priority here. So is that all right? Did I defer to Molly?
Yep. Please, Molly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Molly Roseanne. I'm with Peaceboat US. I'm their youth representative. So I'm just here today. I wanted to talk about Peaceboat's upcoming voyages. After a long break due to the pandemic, we are finally going to be sailing again. We have 2 voyages coming up, so we just wanted to promote that wherever we can. So I have a little document. If you'd like to look at it, that would be wonderful. And spread it out within your network if you know anyone that might be interested in applying to be a part of the voyage. We have our first upcoming voyage is like our Arctic one. So we'll be visiting, starting in London, going up through a few ports in Norway and ending in Iceland. And then we have a Latin America segment where we'll be in Mexico, Guatemala, and Panama, doing work for the UN SDGs. So yeah, if you have any, I just wanted to put this out here. If you or anyone would be interested in applying, definitely, it's a really, really amazing program. So yeah, just wanted to get that out there. And there's some contact information at the bottom of this document if you want to learn more too. My boss, Emily McGlone, she is incredibly knowledgeable in this. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, everyone, for taking this time.
Thank you very much, Molly. And we may have some time at the end of the meeting after the presentation and the discussion to, take questions about that. But thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. And I think I remember seeing something in the Clean listserv about this already. So I've been busy in the conference. So that's another great place to put things. Jim.
Yes. Hey, Frank. And good. I see Amy on here, so maybe she can. Anyway, we can connect on this one. I have been very much eagerly following the Eclipse program in California and how that happens. And I've seen as I've interacted, we're seeing much more connection now with climate leaders and educators. In any case, messages we got back that there must have been over 100 people who have applied to take active role in Eclipse. Some of them are some of the biggest leaders in the country, really experienced and everything. And I kind of reached out on, just as a member of the Clean Network, encouraging Eclipse, if that program isn't ready to work actively with all those 100 leaders, hey, Clean Network's been around for all these years. We have the capacity, like right here, to let people play all sorts of different roles. They don't have to be paid, and it doesn't have to be a thing. Anyway, it was the thing of just reaching out that Clean can support Eclipse, and let's work together. But that's what's happening. So again, I don't want to speak for Amy because she represents Eclipse. I'm a kind of a lurker there too, a lurker they know is there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Amy, did you want to respond, or do you want to just move forward? I do have an announcement.
I don't have any particular announcement. Hi, everybody. I just stepped in a minute late, so I'm not exactly sure the flow of the conversation here.
Sure, I got you. So I have been talking to you all about an upcoming thing that is about to actually happen tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So we are formally launching the climate literacy guide process, where I told you in September this was coming, but it actually happened, was approved, and now is being released by the White House tomorrow at 10. But in the chat, you can see that the request for information for this public process is named there. It was live on the 15th, but it is officially, launching on tomorrow. And my request to you all is to, through this different process than we used in the past, to really push as hard as you can to get as much input through the public request for information process, so that we have the raw materials to help our science and global change leaders in the federal government, now 14 agencies, to approve a new framework of climate literacy. There's 7 questions. The more you can get individuals, no groups come together and put in things, it's all individuals. The more we have to deal with, push us where you want this to go, as boldly, as strongly. You're not wallflowers, but I'm really encouraging you to be as, and just remember, whatever you put in there is attributed to you. This is FOIA-able information. So if you really want to say something, just make sure that you're ready to stand behind it. If anybody ever wants to look in there, they can release this information publicly. So it's an exciting time. We will finish this process this year. Take a look at this color. This color and this color are going to match this color very soon, because this is a monumental task, but it's a really important task. So we're going to do it, but it's in partnership always. So thank you all. Any other announcements? Bora, Ann, you ready? All right. There's always I forgots at the end, or you can do it in the chat. So, and I think you're going to share the slides.
Yes, thank you, Frank. And I barely see any gray hair from my feet. So looking good on my end. I'm gonna start screen sharing.
And you might want to get some glasses.
Okay, now I'm the one showing my age. All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm going to pass it to Bora, who's going to get us started here.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're really excited to be able to be here today to share our project with this group, and a huge thank you to Clean for giving us the opportunity. And I am a proud lurker. Been a proud lurker since probably close to the beginning of Clean, but I am a lurker. So Anne, please, next slide. So my name is Bora Simmons, and I'm the director of the National Project for Excellence in Environmental Education. And with Anne, I serve as the co-lead to this particular project, the development of a new set of guidelines. And Frank has sort of introduced himself already, and I'm sure all of you already know Frank is here today as a member of our writing team. But I also wanted to point out that Jen is also a member of that writing team, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So Anne, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Bora. And I want to admit that I'm a recent lurker and I am so excited to be part of this network now. And I'm impressed. I didn't realize you've been having weekly meetings for so many years. So I'm really excited to be here and to share something that's pretty exciting work that we're doing with NAAEE. And so what we've got planned today is we wanted to go over just a really high level overview of what we've got about the guidelines for excellence and show you what we have so far on our newest set of guidelines. And we want to show you a preview of where we are very, very early in the process, because we've heard that there's so many wonderful minds and wonderful, thoughtful people in this gigantic network. And Frank mentioned early on that we are part of this network of 800 plus individuals. And part of the work that we're doing in the development of these guidelines is to get input from as many people as possible. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process of doing that, but just wanted to share, this is their agenda. We're going to keep things pretty flexible and informal. Please stop us at any time if you've got questions. We're going to be monitoring the chat throughout, and we'll also have some time at the end for your questions. Okay, so if we could just get a pulse of where you are in the room, I want to see where is everybody at when it comes to the Guidelines for Excellence project. If this is the very first time you're hearing this phrase about this project, can you drop in the chat a 0 or a 1? Or if maybe you've gone through a number of trainings, maybe you're part of the Guidelines Trainers Bureau and you know what I'm talking about, drop a 5 in the chat. So just so that you know who else is in the room with us. All right, I'm seeing lots of zeros, and ooh, we got, I think the highest is a 4.5 from Amy. So very cool. So that's great. So this is the perfect audience for us because we really wanted to introduce you to the larger project of where these new set of guidelines are housed, a little bit about the process. And I'm glad to see that we've got some people that are familiar with the work so far. And it looks like we do have a lot of eager folks that are eager to learn more. So thank you for that, Jim. Okay, so first, a little bit about NAAEE. It is a bit of a mouthful of an acronym, not as cool as clean and not as succinct, but we're working on the name. But NAAEE stands for the North American Association for Environmental Education. We are the champion, the backbone, the cheerleaders for anything related to environmental education across North America and beyond. Our audience is centrally located in the US, Canada, and Mexico, but we also have a growing presence across the globe, including members in more than 30 countries. And our network is also made up of over 50 different state and regional and provincial affiliate organizations. And we count over 20,000 members across many sectors of society. And we work with anyone who works in education, environmental education, and that can be formal educators, non-formal educators, government groups, university organizations. And so our audience is very broad, and our mission is also very broad. We use the power of education to advance environmental literacy and civic engagement to create a more equitable and sustainable future for all. And part of that mission is this project that we've been calling the Guidelines for Excellence. And thank you, Bora, for dropping the link in the chat. This is a pretty massive project for us that has been going on since the mid-90s. And it's all about promoting excellence in the field of environmental education. And these sets of guidelines are really truly about what does it mean to be an excellent environmental educator. And we've been happy to receive partnership support from US EPA, the Office of Environmental Education, since the beginning of this project. And we've received tons of support from many more partners, including CLEAN, in the dissemination and in the review and the support of these guidelines over the years. And you'll recognize some other partners on this, but we've gotten a lot of support from so many different organizations. We really could not do this kind of work on our own. So essentially, we've got so far 6 primary products that focus on a specific element of environmental education practice. So for example, we've got guidelines on what it means to work in early childhood education. So our littlest learners, 3 to 6 years old. And we also have our newest set of guidelines around community engagement. So example, if an environmental educator wants to work in the community and center the community's needs and wants and assets front and center in all of their environmental education work, this set of guidelines helps you to do that. So we've got 6 products so far, and in that link that Bora dropped in the chat, you can check out all of them. They're all available for free PDF download on our website. And just as important as all of those various topics of EE practice is the process of how we get to those products. And it truly represents our collective wisdom as a field. And so every single set of guidelines, including this newest one, follows a very thorough public participatory process. And that process really is, it literally involves thousands of individuals letting us know what does it mean to really be a good environmental educator specific to this particular topic. And it often engages educators in sometimes really deep and meaningful, thoughtful conversation about quality EE practice. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it mean to do this work well? And in having these conversations and in collecting this wisdom of an entire field, we are building environmental education as a profession, and we are strengthening the field and building an identity. So it's really important, this work that we're doing. And all of these sets of guidelines promote environmental education, promote excellence in the field. And Bora is now going to walk us through our newest set of guidelines. These are going to be our 7th set, all about climate change and climate justice. So Bora, I'm going to pass it to you to walk us through what we've got so far.
Cool, thank you. So this is, a set of guidelines that we're developing from the very beginning. We're going to be using the same basic process. We started by conducting background research on climate education, and we engaged thought leaders to help us understand the landscape. Next slide, please. So in that process, we interviewed about 20 thought leaders, mostly from North America, a few from around the world, to basically, get their ideas about climate education, climate change, literacy, all of those things, and how we might start to focus this set of guidelines, but also to help us think about our writing team. Next slide, please. So based on their advice and our own research, we formed a phenomenal writing team. There are 10 people who bring us expertise in climate change education, climate justice, environmental justice, youth engagement, and much more, since most people wear more than one hat. The team met for the first time together in October to develop the first draft of the guidelines. Next slide, please. Based on the writing team's recommendation, we asked 3 experts who had very specific expertise in climate justice and environmental justice to review that very first rough draft and give us some targeted feedback. Next slide. So, and then what we've also done is we've formed an advisory committee that helps us widen our reach and to get, again, some more targeted targeted feedback, and specifically to help us disseminate information and help us identify resources and case studies and such. So next slide, please. So one of the big issues with developing any document, and particularly this set of guidelines, is to decide on basically the scope and framing. So in the chat, if you would please complete the sentence. This set of guidelines, I know you know nothing about it, but you know about climate education. So if you're going to write a set of guidelines about climate education, this set of guidelines should provide recommendations for climate education that centers on or focuses on or facilitates. So in the chat, if you would just type a couple of thoughts. Just solutions. Excellent. Humanities. Great. How to know how to fix accessibility to concepts. People. All right. Just climate action. Solutions and resilience. Excellent.
These are great.
Yeah. Basic understanding of the science. Cool. Well, continue to think about that because we had to deal with that quite a bit as the writing team of thinking about, well, what is the focus of this set of guidelines? So next slide, please. So at this point in the process, the writing team is suggesting, and so we're still in draft, that the guidelines should provide recommendations and resources for developing effective educational efforts that empower climate action. So that's kind of the true focus. The focus on climate action was really quite purposeful. We got it from the thought leaders, we got it from the writing team, we got it, frankly, from the literature out there. The guidelines could focus just on climate science or how to engage students in learning about climate change. But the team is recommending that the focus on educational efforts that facilitate the learning necessary to take meaningful action, with a pretty big focus on collective action as being part of this. Okay, next slide, please. The writing team also started to break down what empowering climate action might mean, and that they're producing, the purpose of this set of guidelines will provide guidance on how to develop community-driven climate change education that centers on climate justice and climate science. So kind of, pretty big areas of interest are starting to be, sort of focused in on with this idea of empowering climate action. Next slide. So even with the draft framing, we need to think about who might be using this set of guidelines. So in the chat, if you could list 3 types of individuals who might be involved with facilitating climate learning opportunities that empower climate action. School administrators, classroom teachers, nature center, teachers, museum educators, community leaders, parents. Parents keep showing. Interestingly, when we had our discussions, parents didn't specifically rise into the discussion, but lots of other folks did. Science center folks, community leaders. Yeah, perfect. Next slide, please. So if you have all of these different people who might be involved with this facilitating education or instruction or however you want to think about it, can you now list 3 places or settings where climate education activities that empower climate action might take place? Cultural institutions, perfect. informal, well, we're talking informal educators, so science clubs, everywhere in person, online. I love it. Schools, community centers, libraries, yeah, museums, civic institutions. Perfect, perfect. Next slide, please. So the writing team did spend a fair amount of time discussing the question of who should use this set of guidelines. And they ended up with the task of thinking about that it was useful to really consider a broad range of individuals and organizations from varying settings, and that the notion was to work with communities to find climate solutions. So we are focusing at the community level. Oops, my computer is blinking on me. Ooh, I don't know what's going on. Next slide, please. So that's a mouthful, but it really does sort of come down to that, you know, the types of places and people that you've been listing are all there, and that's all within the scope of this set of guidelines, which is pretty broad to say the least. Next slide, please. So all of this framing taken together brings us to the structure of the guidelines, at least where we are at this point. And basically our way of kind of breaking down all of these giant ideas. So at this point in the process, we're suggesting 5 sort of key characteristics or big buckets of ideas that would help somebody be involved in this process, and especially from an education kind of lens. So we've basically said that climate justice needs to be at its core of any of these efforts, climate systems, that the notion of being locally focused and community driven is important to the process, that it facilitates civic engagement for climate action, and that, you know, you need to have some sort of instructional strategies or programs or thinking about how you're going to help people along with the education components of this. So next slide. So just the typical kind of, oops, there, the typical structure that we have, and we're still working generally on this structure, but you know, it probably will follow something along these lines, is that there's one of these, the big buckets. So climate justice at its core. Next slide. And a description of it. Then you basically have a series of 3 to 5 guidelines underneath that kind of breaks it down a little bit more with a bit of a description. And then next slide, please. And then something called indicators, which just give sort of practical examples or explanations of what that indicator might begin to look like. Next slide, please. And then one of the things to help support all of this information and explanation and ideas is a series of boxes of one sort or another that describe resources that are available out there, that explain ideas that are brought up. So, you know, if we bring up an idea like climate justice, you know, we need to be able to explain to people, you know, sort of what the thinking is around climate justice. Or we bring up an idea like culturally relevant and responsive instruction. What does that mean to help people along? We're also going to be having case studies and such. Okay, so next slide. Anne?
Yes. So before we get to the next slide, I just want to show in the chat, Bora, that Frank is suggesting a 6th key characteristic, which I love. And there's some chat in there about that, about building a green workforce and building capacity to do this work. That's awesome. And then there's another comment from Jim about whether or not we need to define what climate action means in this set of guidelines and what that could look like, and the possibility of including STEM-based action. So any comments on that, Bora, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that we are, as the writing team, will certainly be thinking about. Or do we need to expand this to have more key characteristics, tuck things in underneath something else so that they get highlighted? We've gotten back lots of comments from the field thus far, and some are talking about rearranging them, some are talking about splitting them, some are talking about combining them. So, that's all up there. And the notion of green workforce is certainly a big piece of that. And that notion of what climate action really means and what some of the examples are definitely needs to be in there. Especially, I think people have good senses of individual action, but the notion of collective action and what that means is certainly not as common. So yeah, great ideas.
And this is a great segue into this next section where we want to hear from you based on what you've seen so far. And Bora is going to drop in the chat a very high level draft framework with these 5 key characteristics and a little bit more about the guidelines under each one, what we've got so far. So take a second to peruse that document. It's a Google Doc. And thanks, Bora, for dropping the link. And take a minute, look at it, and let us know, like, if there are strengths that stand out to you, elements that you like. Drop it in the chat, maybe as a plus, and add what you like. And then if there's something else that you want to include and you're already starting to do that, drop that in the chat too, with maybe a plus. And if there's something that causes you heartburn or something that's troubling you in this draft framework so far, drop that in the chat too, with maybe a question mark, so that we know where you stand. So just take a minute to do that now. And that's a great conversation starter, Frank, what you dropped in the chat, that we're really thinking more about what green workforce means. And it's more than just capacity building. It's more inclusive than just workforce. We're talking about education and training and skill building. Do you want to elaborate more on that?
Sure. So one of the things that we're seeing is, there's 2 pieces, right? One is the clean versus the green workforce. And then there's a resilient workforce, climate solution workforce. How you modify workforce is really important. I mean, we can play with these words that modify workforce, but it's a really important additional thing. But capacity is also a bigger idea, because you're getting at something that the Office of Education did in their theory of change about community environmental literacy, meaning that it's not about the individual's capacity or the individual's literacy, but this idea that the community has the capacity to actually do something, which is a broader idea, and it's a powerful idea. But either way, it's a wrestling that I think at this level of the work is a really good one for us to tease apart, push in, and really find that language that is really the right one for our moment.
I love that. It's so cool to be thinking about this work at different scales, and what does it mean to strengthen communities, strengthen organizations, and do that kind of institutional capacity building. That's wonderful.
Agreed.
Any other comments from folks of what you think about these, the draft framework so far? What do you like? What else do you think is missing that you might include? Or anything else that might be causing you some heartburn? Ingrid, I see you have your hand raised. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I like the framework. I think something that would be really helpful to include, or maybe this would be later is just specific examples of some of these things. So when you talk about just solutions, what are some examples of just solutions? Or when you talk about encouraging hope, like what are some examples of ways to do that? Or, whatever, picking, many different of the items here. It always just helps for me, I think, to have concrete examples of what some of these terms are.
Yes, and we absolutely agree with you, Ingrid. And our plan, and Bora mentioned this a little bit earlier about how our hope is to include as many case studies as possible for every single one of these key characteristics. And Ingrid and others, we are looking to all of you in our networks, folks that are reviewing these guidelines and the draft, we need those examples. Would love to showcase work that you're involved in directly, projects that you know about, anything that you think would make good examples and case studies. We would love to hear from you. Or any other comments from you or Frank before we move on? And I see there's
Or Jen.
Frank,
Since
go ahead.
Jen's
Or
been
Jen,
through
yes,
the
Jen's
process.
here too.
No, I'm listening. I'm agreeing with Frank on the workforce and capacity building piece. It's a little surprising, actually, just in sort of the space of time, like how much that's since we first started this process, like how much that is emerging in a way that we would be so remiss to leave it out. And I think I'm just thinking about that. So
Thanks, Jen. And Frank, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so I mean, there's an important word that is being used more now that aligns with that capacity or workforce piece, and that's opportunity. And it really connects into the just transition, because the jobs that are being created, millions of jobs, good jobs, life-sustaining salary jobs, all that language really is, who gets those jobs, right? Who gets those jobs? It totally relates to the first one, but it's a different category of things. But I think that word opportunity, the opportunity to be part of the solution, the opportunity to get a good life-sustaining quality job, the opportunity to have the skills to be able to get those jobs. I mean, it just keeps on going through, but it's a more an abundance mind frame as opposed to a scarcity mind frame. And I think that I'm here at the Council of State Science Supervisors talking with science education leaders from across the country, all states. And when you talk to people in Michigan, and you have one kind of conversation, but when we talk about Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Idaho, Utah, opportunity frames on this issue in jobs will go so much further than the one about the science, because that's really where the hangup is. And these are the heads of science education for those states. So there's an unevenness in our country, and so this framework has got to work in that unevenness. And I think adding this sixth one really gives them a door into the work in a way that a straight science approach is really going to be incredibly problematic. And just one other thing, the frame, for those who don't know, the framework and the work NAAEE has been doing for a really long time was crucial to the success of the climate literacy framework and the original clean collection building process. So a lot of gratitude to NAAEE and your long commitment to excellence, and we join you in that. And so this is a wonderful time that now we have a framework that's actually going into this partnership, which is new and exciting. So thank you, NAAEE.
And thank you, Clean. And actually, just to build off of that little last bit from Frank, is that from the very beginning, we knew that notion of revamping, revisiting the climate literacy framework was part of this, or that it was on the agenda, that it was going to be happening. And so when we had early discussions, it was making sure that whatever we do with this effort meshes well with that effort. And, so it happens that timing is perfect in that we're going to be able to learn from what Frank is learning, Frank and team are learning, and hopefully they're learning a little bit from what, we're learning from our public participation process. So.
Thank you, Bora and Frank. And just want to call attention to a couple of comments in the chat from Jim, talking about the importance of involving students in this work and youth action in this climate action that we're talking about. Do others want to comment on that? Maybe Jen, who does a lot of work with youth. Do you want to comment on the importance of youth in empowering climate action?
How long do we have? Oh, no, wait. Well, I think there's a lot of folks on the phone that could actually comment on the role of young people. I think from a guidelines perspective, I'd love to be thinking about like, how can youth be involved and engaged with making sure their voices are a part of the guidelines process? I mean, I think that that's an important consideration. Like, what does that look like? How might we engage organizations that are working with young people where they can review this and add their own sort of their own perspectives and elevate those perspectives. So I think that that's, right now where what I'm thinking about is how do youth show up here, and how are we not at the same time, I still hear it all the time, like, oh, it's all up to the youth, that we're not burdening. It's not some like burden piece, but it's more like, how are we working together? Like, how are we working as advocates and allies in this space? How are we showing up in a way that is, both creating some space, but also being supportive and actionable and accountable. So those are all the ways that I've been thinking about it.
Thank you, Jen. And that's why you're part of the writing team. It's so important to have that perspective.
And just as an aside, so we've had a draft that's been out for review, and I'm going to give you the link in just a moment so that you can go up and sign up and review if you would like to review, or just be on our list to receive updates as we move along. But in getting the reviews back from people, we've actually, Jen, you will like this. We've actually had a couple of teacher and student combo groups commenting. So a teacher brought in, some sixth graders and said, let's review this together. And then they write their comments. So that I thought was, we didn't target that. We didn't specifically invite that. We just kind of said, everybody's welcome. Which has its problems. But on the other hand, we have had, some groups like that, and we will be able to look at some of the demographics of who has reviewed. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's, it's pretty, there's a pretty nice hunk of that kind of youth-ish group who have already commented. Maybe not, huge, but it's pretty well spread across the age spectrum. The other part of it is that we've gotten comments back from every continent, with the exception of Antarctica. So even though this is, sort of a North American effort, for the most part, we have gotten comments from India and Japan and Taiwan and the Philippines and Africa and Peru and Brazil, so we're getting comments from various parts of the world outside of North America.
We've got a little bit more time to add Antarctica to the list, Bora.
That's right. That's right. How many people are down there at any one time?
Is there a question from you, Amber? I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm really jumping in here informally. First, I just want to say hello and from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. We are so happy to be in this space. This is my daughter, Isis. She's an international homeschooler, and we are here as an extension of the Baltimore Green Justice Workers Cooperative, and we have a project that we're working on here in Dar es Salaam, actually in Mbeya, but we are located in Dar es Salaam. So anyway, this is our first night here. Forgive me because I'm just trying to connect the dots as I'm formulating my own thoughts and questions. But when you start talking about the youth, I can't help but to say a few things. I am so glad to see that there's a space for the youth in the area of environmental justice and awareness and climate justice. And I think that because their generations and those to come are going to be the ones to use space in this area, that it's important that we equip them now. And so my daughter's role in this is she's a youth warrior leader where she'll be able to learn. This is a learning space for both of us. Let me make that clear. This is new for me. We're green in this, but that she would take on the role of educating others also here in Africa on this continent. And really, you know, the people who live here, a lot of the local Tanzanian children here, you know, a lot of them, their curriculum, they're required to learn about farming and agriculture. It's a standard in a lot of these villages, but they have very little knowledge about the environment and the climate and how it really, you know, sustains life. And so I just very happy to be here. I wanted to say thank you, and that as I continue formulating my questions, we're here observing, and I just wanted to say hi. That's all. Oh, I wanted to also say, you mentioned, I saw someone, you were talking about policy and having a teacher and student pair up to do comments and things like that. I think as a homeschooling mom, that would make a great addition to curriculum. I mean, we're always, you know, figuring it out sometimes. And so I think now this is another topic area, and that would be a great assignment or project for us to participate in if the opportunity comes up. And like I said, being in this learning space, learning about policy, even though we're outside of the United States right now, it's still our home. It's still very important to us. It's still relevant to the work that we're doing. So asante sana.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I think it would be really cool, Bora, if we could dig into more about the process and how folks are using the draft framework to inform classroom lessons and curriculum. That's kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, it is. Frank?
Yeah, but there's Amber, you open a really important point here. While most of the work that we're talking about is either United States focused or North American focused, the work we do in those contexts don't stay there. And I think we always have to remember that the deep, significant, well-resourced work that we are doing here is really for the world. And it informs the world, and our ability to have that in our minds, our collective minds, as we do this work, so that we know that we're generous in spirit and generous in learning. We'll receive and we'll give, and we have a lot to give, but we also have a lot to learn. So I think, you know, that your invitation there to keep that, you know, more forward in our approach. The climate literacy guide is, no one else in the world has made something like that. And it is a gift, you know, that we give for our work, especially, but it doesn't stay there. So I think, you know, as we're wrestling with this, as we make decisions, is that a decision that is going to make it easier for international communities to value and benefit? Or do we make a decision that's going to make it harder for them? Which image, which photograph, which reference, which highlight? All of that stuff is really, really significant in signaling and also adding value into a wider context. So, you know, at Bora, you've already alluded to that in your remarks, but I think we could probably be a little bit more intentional about receiving and signaling that we did receive international input, not just North American or United States input in the process, and then the use process also is valuable to track. But I think, you know, there's a lot of context why that's important. But I think, you know, in general principles, it's good to, you know, we're all on one planet, and we all were working towards, you know, a better planet for all. So but thank you for bringing that perspective, Amber, and to your daughter.
Yeah, and I'll just make a side comment along with that, is that in getting some of these comments from other places outside of North America, you do get insights into language. And sometimes the language is really easy to fix, but it widens the perspective. So, in the draft, we use certain language that, I got very pointed comments from some folks who kind of said, well, yeah, that centers you in North America, but we ... don't have that experience. We don't have, this as a, we would call it this. And so fairly easy fixes to make some of it much more accessible, much more opening and welcoming to people outside of North America. We're also trying to widen our invitation to folks to get some case studies that are not just North American, with that notion that, there are other folks out there who are doing phenomenal work, and it's great to highlight them because it's phenomenal work and people should know about it. So it shouldn't just be North American, but all of that, it's time, it's, effort, it's all of those things that we have limited capacity. Speaking of capacity, as being a great sixth key characteristic. The timeline.
The timeline. Do you want to talk about the timeline, Bora?
Sure. So I brought you up through, October, November, December with having the writing team meeting, and then having it reviewed by people with expertise in climate justice and environmental justice. And then in February, we posted the first full draft for review for us to be able to gather input. And I'm going to give you the link to that. So basically, this is just a Google Forms sign-up sheet that you can go to, fill out, and then you'll get the information. You'll get the link to the full draft as well as a link to the response sheet. Originally, the deadline for public review was March 15th, but then we knew we had this, and we have another presentation next week. And I keep getting emails from people who said, I haven't been able to get to it yet. So we've extended it for at least a month. And so please do, if you have the time and effort, take a bit of time to review and give us some feedback at this point. But also, if you get on that list, you'll get emails about upcoming drafts. So starting about now and into April, we'll be synthesizing those comments. The writing team is going to meet again in the middle of May, face-to-face. And so they're going to basically take those comments and work on revisions and trying to figure out what in the world this sixth key characteristic might look like. Will certainly be part of it. So then they'll revise, then we'll clean it all up, and we'll post it again, probably sometime in July or August, to get more comments and gather input. And then we'll see where we are. Meantime, we're working on things like case studies and gathering information about case studies. We have a wonderful person who's going to be our writer for that, but also getting ideas about what resources are most important to highlight. And particularly in that is that, just as a point, I think, amongst the writing team, certainly, and, Ann and I, we have a reasonable handle on what those resources would be for North America. But again, in spreading out, like, are there great websites, resources, documents, curricula, whatever, that we should be highlighting that are from Taiwan, that are from the Philippines, that are from, Latin America or Africa? the Mideast that we should be highlighting. So we're asking for that kind of input because we would love to, again, highlight good and wonderful stuff. Where we go after August, we'll basically gather the input, we'll revise again, we'll kind of sit back and see where we are and then continue on with the process. And we'll be taking all the good work of Frank and his team and trying to fit it in there.
And that's all we had. So Frank, turning it over to you.
Bora, it's such a joy to have you join us in this space. Just so we all know, a lot of what makes climate literacy possible is Bora and her process of lumping and splitting. I've already used it about 25 times since I saw you, because it's going to be a lot of lumping and splitting. But we all know deadline for getting the climate literacy feedback for our process is going to be May 31st of this year. We're going to do ours a little faster because the urgency of it is now. So early and often and individual. So no consensus inputs, it's all individual inputs. So, but thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you with us as well. So we only have 2 minutes left. Are there any other, I forgot, like, ooh, this thing is about to happen, I forgot to let you know. Any other quick questions, announcements? Really? Just, look, I'm a Quaker and I used to be a teacher, so wait time is not a problem for me. We only have a minute, so your time is now. If you have something to say that's urgent. Well,
Frank,
thank you all.
I like to hold off as a white male who has a lot of inherent power that's unfair. Please share. There are lots of examples of climate action work that's been done with multi-generational for years. There's a lot of experience. And as I put in the chat, one I would ask is please have people know that if we focus on policy and climate action plans, we need people to do that. But there's a lot of history of talking to politicians who do plans and nothing ever comes of it. And it sends the message to students that all you can do is have your opinion and talk to politicians, and that won't do anything. How do we know the difference between a real promise and something real, and that there are alternatives where the students can take action directly themselves? So just please, there's a lot of experience to be shown here. We're not starting from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
to that,
I
go
just
ahead,
put
Deborah.
my email in there. So if you have leads to great case studies or resources, just shoot me a quick email. Would
Bora,
really appreciate it.
One well of untapped awesomeness is in the UNFCCC process, all countries have to write something called a national communications report. I'm the lead for the education, training, and public awareness chapter of the national communications. We just completed the 8th national communications. In all countries, they're supposed to write a whole bunch of stuff about climate education, training, and public awareness by statute. You can go to the Japanese report or the German report or the Tanzanian report and see what did they put in there. You might be surprised, or you might be surprised another way. But either way, you probably are going to be surprised with pleasantly or, ooh, what, that's it? But still, I think it is a font, a pool to dip your cup in, and maybe you'll dip it in again. And it'd be, hopefully you see some good stuff. Last time I looked at Japan, I was like, wow, that's some interesting stuff going on in Japan. Who knew? It's right there, only if you look in the reports. So read them, because they put a lot of time into writing them. So anyway, looks like we're a minute over. So great deal of gratitude to you all in our international version of the Clean Call weekly call. So thank you, and look forward to the next week, and then some again. Thank you, Bora.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
And Gina, can we get the chat?
Yeah, I can send that to you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
See ya.
thanks,
Thank you.
Katie.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Frank and I are gonna have a chat here.
Yeah. So Gina, thanks for hanging out for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to touch bases with you in terms of the pre-COP 28 discussion I'm hoping to have. Originally, the plan was I was hoping to get together, have an informal chat with the people who on the network who have been to a COP before, just to get kind of a profile of the observer's experience. And that proved to be a little bit more difficult than I anticipated. Did manage to get around to talking with Eric a little bit. He had some suggestions, and then I've also got a question for you along those lines. So one of the suggestions he had was if there's a possibility of getting a copy of the spreadsheet, I guess, for future clean calls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Would it be okay if let me see. Sometimes we have access issues, so can I put it in the chat and you can tell me if you can open it or not?
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me just
I did. I know you sent out that email to everyone, and I did one of those things where I read it, and I said, "Let me see who else responds," and then it's still in my email inbox. So I do want, if you, you're going to tell me more about stuff. I'm just
okay.
Say that if you need help, I will help.
It opened up well, so no problem.
Great.
So anyway, one person who did respond pretty enthusiastically, actually two people, Joe Robertson and Sadis Citron, both from Citizens Climate. And one of the reasons they responded so enthusiastically is that they've apparently been doing the People's Pavilion since, I guess, about 2019 or something. Anyway, what I am thinking about here is reaching out to Sadis and saying, would you mind doing a clean call on the pavilion? And I'm thinking possibly having something like that where she and possibly Joe could talk about what they're doing, because they're actually kind of in cahoots with UNFCCC on this. So it's not just an independent effort out there. Putting that forth and then seeing if it might be possible to have an informal discussion the next week. Where we could then follow up on that.
I like that. A presentation and then a discussion the week following. I like that. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that, so I will reach out to Asadis. I've got the schedule now.
Right.
So I can reach out to her and then see what she has to say and then get back to you. I do notice it looks like there's a number of blank spots in, looks like May and June.
Starting in April, yeah.
That would be great.
And then, of course, the blank spots we have open for presentations, and then the informal conversations. I am always looking for topics for informal conversations, so we can scoop one of those up pretty easily. So whatever works for them, we're pretty open, as you can see.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it would be nice to have sort of a presentation, informal discussion pair that are
I like that.
close to each other in time. Okay, cool. Cool. That was what I wanted to talk to you about.
And if you need language or instruction, like presenter instructions, if you have that too, just let me know in case you feel like you need some kind of explanation about like what the clean calls are and that type of thing. I have that. So let me know if you need any text or that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think it probably might be best to, well, again, it's going to depend on their availability, but I'm thinking maybe towards later May in terms of this discussion, because one of the things I'd like to do is try to encourage other people I've known who've been observers at the COPs to attend one or both of these sessions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that sounds great. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, hey, my pleasure. I'm really sort of gung ho about making sure this happens.
Good. That's good.
So, okay,
I
sounds
appreciate it.
good.
Thank you
take
so
care.
much, Frank. Bye.
Goodbye.